Okay, guys, for the first topic, I really want to talk about recent gaming events and showcases. Obviously, we've talked at length about PlayStation and Xbox, but obviously, we've got events like Gamescom, we've had the Destiny 2 showcase, and we've even have Warframe Tennocon. And really, I want to dive into some of the news, in these areas or these showcases. And I want to ask a question: are these events now just non-events? Not interesting. Why are we wasting our time? And should we be going the way of Sony? Just give us trailers. What is it? Yeah. Do they add any value anymore? That's the question I'm really posing on some of these events. Personally, I love a good event. I think gamers deserve, if you like, real showcases, real surprises, you know, seismic announcements, and festivals to celebrate what we love. But is that what we're really getting these days? Or is it merely just an extension to the marketing department? Usual cycle. Not sure. Yeah. So let's roll into it. I mean, let's roll into it. So obviously, recently we've had uh, Gamescom 2020, 2022, I should say. Happened 24th of August, ended 28th of August. And I think the event this time was in person and online. And I think this is one of the events that, we'll be looking to go to when the time's right, guys. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, what I will say about it, there was a lot of games that were talked about. Yeah. Whether they're big games or not, open for, debate. What I will say, for Gamescom, the usual cringe-worthy moments happened. Yeah. And I'm not really sure what it is about that kind of event. We also had the Destiny 2 showcase for 2022, and I think that happened 23rd of August. Okay, and I think that was largely about Beyond Light, amongst other things, if I understood it.
Lightfall.
Ah,
Lightfall.
yeah, Lightfall. Is that the name of the new expansion?
It is, yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay,
So Beyond Light was the last one.
and then we had Warframe Tennocon 2022, which was a fair bit earlier. July 16th. And I just snuck this in here because, as you know, I'm a bit of a Warframe fan. I wanted something to talk about. This was it. Outside of Gamescom, um, and what they dropped was uh, a new expansion or a new piece of DLC, I'll call it. Obviously, free, called the Divari Paradox, and a new game. They've got a new game, Soulframe. Fairly uninspiring name, but it's a new game. Yeah, which looks like let's say more of a old school fantasy RPG third person game, Soulframe.
Is it on the same game engine, is it?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. I would be
Yeah.
surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But let's roll right into it now. So let's start off with Gamescom. So obviously Gamescom, um, basically well-known European event, largely kind of recognised as the E3 of Europe, if you like. Hundreds of thousands of visitors a year, but different, has a different flavour to it. Now, I pretty much focused on, opening night live with, Jeff Keighley makes his regular appearance on these events, opening up shows, yeah. So he did that event, uh, rattled off what felt like 50 plus games during the actual event. I think it was a 2 hour event, 2 hour showcase. And I thought to myself, number one, there's a lot of content. Number two, I thought to myself, not a lot of this is actually that earth shattering. And then there were one or two really bizarre moments in that showcase that I'll get into, and the usual really cringe-worthy, moments that, in my view anyway, Gamescom is actually, very, well known for. And I'll call it out straight away. Actually, it was really the game of the show type announcements. Yeah, they would basically put in between kind of game announcements in the actual kind of showcase on opening night live, and you'd have stuff like the most anticipated Xbox game or the most anticipated PlayStation game. Yeah. And it's such throwaway kind of awards, but you'd have people kind of actually on stage getting the award. And the silliest thing about some of these awards were you'd have the most anticipated PlayStation game, but it'd be like no game that anybody's actually anticipating. It would just so happen to be at the show, yeah. And I thought, look, well, this is absolutely throwaway. I mean, please get rid of this, right? And you might have something that resembles a a credible showcase for gaming. And obviously, Jeff Keighley, did a reasonably good job in kind of like really frontlining, the show itself, doing what he usually does. I mean, did you guys actually catch the show in its entirety, or just parts of it?
For me, no. I think with a lot of these events, I typically skip. I think most news outlets will bring forward any of the really interesting stuff that I'm kind of looking forward to my attention, and yeah, generally I'll skip them and just wait for big things and trailers and stuff, and I'll kind of watch those things. So no, I it's kind of a non-event for me, really.
Yeah, I mean, I typically like to watch these things, but for this particular event, I wasn't free during that period. Um, and I'm glad I missed it, to be honest, because like you just called out, it was a bit of a non-event. I mean, it almost feels like we're feeling the effects of COVID, right? Games have been put back, um, and I actually, me and Al were talking about this. We might be entering a new realm of not having the same cycle of news with the same level of intensity every year to justify some of these shows. That's a bit of a different topic, right? So, but yeah, I no, I didn't.
Wondering, like, based on what you're saying, really, whether some of these some of these game releases announcements were done to tie in with some of these big events. Yeah.
Yeah,
But if the big events are no longer big and they don't help with the marketing, what's the point?
Yep, yep.
I think they're almost kind of in a holding pattern. Sony and Microsoft and what were kind of hinting that they weren't going to have many big reveals come out to this event. It will be almost like a post show of their E3. They were just going to maybe show another trailer or maybe have some development team talking. And that's kind of what the trailers for the games were like. They were just a bit more of an insight of a game that you already knew and no real bombshell news really. I mean, there's a couple of things in there around the Sony DualSense controller, which is quite interesting.
Yeah,
Um, but it was very much, as you said, like pretty much filler.
definitely. It felt absolutely like filler with maybe, like you said, a little bit more detail on some of the things that we've seen before.
Yeah, and I think what you said at the start, I think Gamescom was the power of Gamescom was most more being in person, seeing the games, playing some of the demos, meeting the developers, seeing all the stands they produce, and that's the kind of the vibe similar to E3, right? It was more a physical event. We probably missed that in the news cycle. The news cycle was obviously then weak, right? So
Yeah. Well, let's go through what was said anyway in opening night live, and I'm going to rattle through some of these, and maybe on some of the more interesting items, I'm going to maybe we'll get into a bit more detail. What they did on Gamescom opening night live, Jeff Key, they opened up with this thing called Everywhere, and it's basically done, I think, helmed by an ex-GTA guy, Leslie Benzie. It's really not clear what it is. They've been developing it for 5 years, and everywhere feels like everything. Because if you look at the if you look at the trailer, right, it's got racing. There's some, I think there was some third person action. It was strange in that they didn't really explain what it was. I'm basically thinking metaverse question mark here. Is this a opening shot into what we think would be a more expensive kind of like metaverse type offering? It's an ex GTA, like guy at the helm with this thing. I'm just wondering, you know. And it's a strange thing to be opening a show with as well. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
They moved on to what really was a cinematic of Dune Awakening, which is a survival MMO. And then obviously, Jeff Keighley announced, well, not really kind of announced, but said, "Yep, Sony's given us something to show off." So we had this DualSense Edge controller, and I thought to myself, as good as the DualSense Edge controller might be, Sony, is that it? Is that all you're going to show
Yeah.
us?
Yeah, and the controller is I personally think it's too similar to the existing DualSense, which is a good controller, but for the premium price they're going to charge for this, where you can just swap out the sticks and there's a couple of extra buttons, I was expecting more.
Yeah,
Similar to how Microsoft do. So
yeah. Do you know how much this thing costs?
I don't think they've announced it. You
Yeah,
might know.
I think it'll be 150 bucks, right, or something like
It'll
that.
be something like that with similar prices. That
Yeah,
um,
I mean the Xbox equivalent, the Elite, doesn't actually look that different. That's the thing. I mean, to me, that looks like an Xbox controller. But yeah, I get it. I mean, this one just looks like a DualSense. Literally, I didn't catch any kind of like discerning differences between the two things.
maybe it will come out on the actual reviews that like let's say the D-pad has got better materials and better directional movement, and the sticks have better materials and it feels better. The triggers, I think there's probably that in that sort of level of
Yeah,
detail that it will come out. I saw the sticks are swappable,
yeah.
which I'm assuming just the height as well.
I think it's stuff like the turning circle and stuff like that.
Yeah,
They're doing that sort of thing. I mean, which is cool, but this is Gamescom. We know God of War Ragnarok's around the corner. Last of Us was around the corner. You would have thought they've got some surprises, but yet, here you go. Here's our new £150, and I'm just thinking it's £150 DualSense Edge controller, which is our Pro controller.
that
And it's probably what they would have been posting on the PlayStation blog.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But Xbox have just can royally dropped the ball. That Sony are not going to release any news. They're going to hold everything back now, aren't they?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know what it is really, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's complete. It's like ultra arrogance and overconfidence, which is how you lose first
Did
place
wonder that. I
position
mean, yeah,
eventually.
at first I didn't think that was the case, but now they're feeling more and more like the PS3 kind of gen, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Gonna need to get stung or bitch slapped. That's what I think
They,
it comes down to. Yeah, let's get away from Sony. Let's get away from. So obviously a more Callisto Protocol kind of like gameplay footage.
looks really good, that
Yeah,
one. I think
definitely.
that's on my list. Yeah.
Lords of the Fallen, and it's actually the second game. The original,
Oh, is it okay?
the original was launched in 2014.
Yep.
Pretty much Souls-like. A kind of indie style game called Moving Out, Team 17. Hogwarts Legacy, which really it's a new trailer, but they kind of really themed it around dark magic. So you follow kind of obviously if you know Harry Potter dark magic.
Yeah. I think this game looks really
Yeah,
good.
slithering. Some people do say that. I mean, like,
I'm reading the books with my daughter now, and they spent some money on this game. They've really brought to life, because there's been a couple of in the trailers where they actually walk through the common
yeah,
rooms
yeah,
for the houses. Each of the because there's four houses, aren't
yeah,
there?
yeah,
They've spent some money actually recreating a lot of the detail from the book. So if it has some deep RPG mechanics, because they've shown some of the gameplay
yeah,
for the fighting, and it looks quite good. This is something I'm actually interested in. Maybe not at full price though.
yeah. They've got a very rich lore, that's for sure. Very interesting universe that everybody knows and loves, and they can do a lot with it.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not going to make it like a Destiny raid type thing. They've got good potential. Is it the Just Cause developers?
I'm not sure actually.
I think the Avalanche Studios are
Is it
involved with the
Avalanche?
Just. I
Really?
think they're not the they're one of the maybe one of the partnering studios. I'm pretty sure they are. So it's got. I mean, I'll have a look as we go through the list, but
Yeah, I mean it could be good, and I think it is more of a persistent game world, isn't it? But anyway, I mean, look, so they're tackling both kind of like you know, light and bad magic in it, which is, you know, obviously a big part of the books and in the films. So either it's going to be Expelliarmus, whatever it is, or Crucianus, good or bad, you know, light or dark, right?
Yeah.
And then I think Randy Pitchford came on stage to announce new tales from Borderlands, from the Borderlands, well-known spin-off from the Borderlands franchise. So that's coming out actually October this year. Dying Light 2, Bloody Ties DLC. Yeah, Pirate's Tale was also kind of shown off, which, to be honest, didn't look, in my eyes, very good. Marauders, which is a loot raid shooter, and had a kind of fairly weird look. Destiny 2, and it's Lightfall, isn't it?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
Lightfall. Yeah.
we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I made a mistake earlier. It was actually Beyond Light was 2 years ago. Then there was the Witch Queen.
That's
Then
right.
this new one is Lightfall. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Sonic Frontiers got a new trailer coming out 8th of November this year. It looked a lot better than the first time I saw it, but it still looked quite strange seeing Sonic in what was a kind of pseudo-realistic setting.
No studios got the conversion to 3D right for Sonic, have they?
No, no
It's just
studio.
they keep trying, don't they?
I do keep trying. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm thinking to myself, why bother? If it's a
I tell
2
you
or
why.
2.5D game, why not?
They should have stuck to the 2D game, but the movies have done really well. I've seen the two recent films with my kids. They are actually really good. If you can get past the kind of the hybrid real life setting with humans and then Sonic, the acting and the storyline and the action for a kids movie, it's really good. I would highly recommend watching it, actually, to be honest.
I do wonder why they've kind of like adapted that art style. Have they adapted that art style in? Where you got Sonic in a pseudo kind of realistic, like like the Sonic films,
Mm,
Sonic with real live actors. Be interesting.
yeah, well, yeah.
The next on the menu was Under the Waves, which is supposedly a love letter to the ocean. But I think what was actually quite interesting about this is Quantic Dreams is actually publishing it. Quantic Dreams of Rain. Was it Rain?
Yeah,
Heavy
Heavy
Rain,
Rain,
Heavy
yeah.
Rain,
Heavy Rain.
yeah.
and
Was it Beyond Human?
Yeah, yeah,
Beyond Him, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they're publishing this. We had Goat Simulator that comes out 17th of November this year. And what was interesting to me was this, title Return to Monkey Island, 19th of September, which some of you might remember. You might remember the original Monkey Island. It's an old 90s PC sort of adventure game. Basically, it was in between a text adventure and going, fully user controlled. For the time, it was a pretty stellar title. Yeah. So Return to Monkey Island's coming out now. Next title, Moonbreaker. This was quite interesting. So it's connected to this author. I think his name's Brandon Sanderson. What's interesting about him is that he actually completed the Wheel of Time fantasy books. Wheel of Time, well-known D&D fantasy novels. And Amazon have actually got a series, or they started a series with that. And it's basically made by the people who did Subnautica. And it's very interesting, turn-based tactical game. But really, it takes it on a little bit further in that, I mean, with a lot of these turn-based games you play on the tabletop, you literally got the kind of models, like a Warhammer game.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've retained the kind of the models in game. So rather translating them to kind of like living entities, living whatever, it's just a model. So I've done something quite interesting there. Whether it will be good or
yeah,
not sure. Friends v Friends is a deck build first-person shooter, which had a really unusual art style, which I'll just basically say reminded me of what a teenager would scribble on his notebooks within a classroom. Yeah, when he's in a class that he's not that interested in. And then we had Lives of P, P equaling Pinocchio, and this title was actually also shown off by AMD in their recent announcement event for Ryzen 7000, and it's a day one on Game Pass. And this thing is a third person action game which is very Souls like. Very Souls like. Now there's more. Stranded Alien Dawn, early access in October, which is some sort of survival game. Atlas Fallen comes out in 2023. Fantasy RPG. Looked good, actually. Looked good. But what's interesting is from the people who bought you The Surge. There's a Surge 1 and 2, and it's really a sci-fi Souls-like game that's been
Yeah.
quite well received. That might be one to look out for. You had the kind of video, and then you had a small snippet of gameplay, which people might have missed actually, but it looked decent. Next title they announced is something that's really kind of like interesting for me. Homeworld 3. This is actually a space-based RTS real-time strategy game. Interestingly, it's not been done by Relic, who were the original creators of Homeworld. Homeworld really at the time kind of not quite redefined, but did something with RTS that was very, very different to everybody else. Yeah. And I've said that this to Al before, right? If you listen to the soundtrack of Homeworld, yeah, it's very like the the last Battlestar series. The soundtrack is very, very similar, and I can only think Battlestar was inspired by what happened in Homeworld because it's just too similar. Yeah. Out Genshin Impact 3.0 update. That's one for you,
I've been
obviously.
playing it already. Yep.
Yay or nay?
Actually, it's changed up the meta, so yes, it's been pretty good.
Nice. Yeah.
Interesting. Honka Style Rail. I hope I pronounce it. Or Honkai.
Honkai, yeah.
The trailer gave nothing away, but it's a tactical role-playing game. High on Life. Obviously, we saw this in the Xbox showcase. It was that game, that shooter, first-person shooter. I think it was based on the Rick and Morty universe, if you remember it. And it looked as if it really had potential. But they showed off what I can only describe as the worst level ever to demo. It was this bland-looking level where you had rising kind of like liquid, where the player had to kind of like really swing from point to point shooting stuff. Why they showed it, I have no idea. Hard Space Shipbreaker out on 20th September on consoles. What would I call this? It's kind of a survival, like an MMO type game. Telltale's The Expanse, which is based on a television series on Amazon. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I think this is based on some sort of 80s or 90s film. Scars Above, which reminded me a lot of Returnal in its kind of art direction. I don't know how to pronounce this, but Wide Song, which is no idea what this is actually. But all I understood from this is that they're veterans of Bethesda's Fallout and Skyrim games, basically working on it. An expansion for Age of Empires 4 was announced, Ottomans and Malians. Gotham Knights got an official villains trailer with Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn in there. And then this really nice looking, I think it was a Chinese developed action game called Where the Winds Meet. Yeah. And what really struck me about this game was how very Chinese it was. Quite honestly, I mean, like, it didn't try and dumb it down, music, art style, very, very kind of like, Chinese. Very much so. Didn't try and dumb it down, but very interesting. Then it started to get a bit strange. So Kojima basically comes on and announces that he has a podcast. A podcast. Hideo Kojima has a podcast starting in Spotify in September, and that Jeff Keighley is going to probably be on.
Can he even speak English? He must do, right? He's always speaking Japanese, isn't he?
Yeah. How is this going to work? I don't know. What is he going to speak about? I don't know.
It must be like game development and stuff like that. It has to be all his user experience. People are interested in that sort of stuff.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, it could be some sort of marketing ploy for whatever he's doing.
Bungie have been like sharing their engineering values and principles for how they work and how they make changes, and they've been releasing that. So when they have a weekly update, they chuck in stuff like this is how we work, and they apparently been getting high views on that type of thing. People are interested in it. It creates more um,
Engagement and connection. Yeah.
engagement and sympathy for developers. They're all getting abused on social media websites, aren't
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they?
That is actually quite interesting. But I do wonder what he's going to have in him. I do wonder if it's some sort of short-term thing he's doing or not. Not sure.
Kojima is all about long-term changing up the game, as in the game model way of doing things, right?
Yeah, what a game is really.
Yeah,
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 definitely. And moving on, Part Beyond, which is obviously like very much like Bullfrog's old seminal theme park game. And then another strange thing, we had a car with gaming features that was Pokemon themed in the show. They literally got a mini.
I saw that
Yeah,
one actually. Yeah,
it's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
yeah. The thing is, yeah, I've got three sisters. The younger one is of that generation where they obsessed about Pokemon, and they were more attached to these type of things, and she would go out and buy a car themed on something silly like this. So whereas we're old fogies, right, compared to that generation. So
True, 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 true. Moving on, Warhammer 40,000 Dark Tide. So small gameplay, looking good. I really actually want to play this one with you guys because I think we'd have a lot
yeah,
of fun
no,
with this.
it looks. I mean, I've never been attracted to Warhammer, but I have to say the game looks good.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. I mean the Vermintide game they did, which is also based on the other side of Warhammer, which is the more D&D version of it, was a lot of fun. It's shallow, but a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Then we had Blacktail, A Witch's Fate, first-person fantasy action game. Phantom Hellcat, which was a third in 2.5D action game. Crossfire X, which is a well-known Xbox, I think it's an exclusive. Dorf Ramantech was coming to Switch. The Outcast Trials, which is a horror game, looks pretty horrible, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah. And then the finals, which is a shooter with a game show format, guessing very much like the Running Man, but obviously, FPS. And Dead Island 2, which actually looked good. And I remember Dead Island. I mean, that was one of the last games I saw at E3 when I actually spoke to the developers about Dead Island. So it's
from the trailer, he was really popular at the
yeah,
time. Remember?
it's looking
Yeah.
good. It's a sequel that's been promised for a while, but never come out.
Do you think? Look at. I mean, this is a boring list. Can you
Yep.
imagine Jeff Keighley putting his name behind this list of announcement?
I don't think he's got
It's
much of a
just,
choice.
yeah, it's embarrassing, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really.
this is what he can get. The thing about this list, right? When you read through it, there are no what you would call really big hitters, if you know what I mean. Not
And
one.
you know what? It's not just this. I was speaking to Al before. E3 wasn't for me banging either this year, and it's almost like I mean we've all got big massive back catalogs. I'm more excited about going through my back catalog and even games that aren't on my catalog that I would that want to play that I haven't bought yet than actually anything forward looking at the moment,
I mean, yeah.
which is not a good place to be.
I mean, think about it. I mean, what did Sony do? Here's our DualSense Edge. Here's a video. We're not even going to go there, right? But here's a video that we're going to post anyway. Knock yourselves out. Yeah.
I don't understand that if they even had stuff like, look, we've got this game out. Here's an extra skin, extra weapon, extra car. Chuck some Gran Turismo stuff in there. Like this like nothing.
It's not that important to them. That's the thing.
Yeah,
It's not that important. It's not that important for
it's a,
Xbox either.
yeah, just a bit disappointing to
I
be
mean,
honest.
yeah. I mean, look at the list. I mean, there's Activision, EA, Ubisoft.
They chuck nothing in there as well. So what? Okay, these are game announcements. How about physically at Gamescom? Were you able to play some of the games that are coming out
I think so.
that aren't on this list?
Uh, no. I think anything that you could have played would be on this list. Yeah, if you like.
Yeah, okay.
The really big hitters, like I mean, you weren't going to go to Gamescom and play Ragnarok, God of War Ragnarok. You weren't going to go there and play The Last of Us Part 1. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to die, isn't it, Gamescom then? If we're heading
Well,
this way.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, it just depends. I mean, I still maintain, right, you still need some sort of physical event for games. Yeah. But you also need the big players to be basically a bit more invested than they are. Like back in the days of E3 when it was up there, Sony, Microsoft, all the big publishers were there, no doubt about that, and they used to drop some money, to be there, and also the events they did. I mean, I told you about the story. There was one event I did, the Sony one,
Yeah.
where they just basically fed everybody that was at the event. They literally fed them all. If you wanted to be fed.
Wow. Wow. I think the physical
Yeah,
Gamescom has got
they've
2
got
more
to change the
years and it's
format.
done.
I think
I just
they've got to change it.
Yeah, but then the format's going to have more. I'm talking about the physical side of the show, right? It's going to have more demos or more games, or you get like, but they won't do that, well, will they? Because it's harder work, and games are getting more complicated to build. Forget
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
AAA games, even like the mid-tier games are
The
getting
the
more
mid tier
complicated
was
to build.
like
They don't have time to make
I'm
demos anymore.
guessing AAA from 5 years ago. The indies are they're special as well. I mean these are not games that people don't spend £1 million on.
Yeah. I mean, just out of interest, like if you were to put a percentage of the games on that list you just gone through that you're even
Yeah,
remotely
let me have a quick
interested in, like
quick buzz through it.
I'm about 5%
Five
probably for
percent.
me.
Yeah, similar.
Yeah, and that's 5% is what I'd
Wow.
like to play. Probably 10% is actually what I'm interested in following because it just seems interesting. But it's nothing more than that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's because we get more choice these days or not, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is because the really big players are just not engaging. They're not invested in these shows anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a
Yeah,
shame.
it may just depends on what they get
It's
out of
done
it,
for me.
right? So if there's nothing they're gonna actually get out of it in comparison to what they're already announcing, then kind of defeats the purpose, right? So there has to be a reason for you to be
Yeah,
there.
I reckon they get more eyes on each of these games by just doing one or two
yeah,
announcements on Twitter, and then YouTubers
Mm,
will just bake it into their shows, and then they get
correct,
more eyes on the,
yeah,
the
correct. And
games
Sony and people
that
like
way than
Sony
just
know that.
having this big bang show.
They've seen the numbers.
Yeah, and there's people like us as well, right, who actually like a
Yeah,
little trickle of news throughout the whole year.
yeah, because it's a lot. It's
And then we're
it's like a,
scared to watch these
it's an
2 3 hour
investment in
shows.
time. And actually,
it's huge
if there's
investment.
only like 5% of the stuff is actually any of interest, then is it effective use? It just doesn't.
Yeah, there were big titles in here that we were interested in. Our perspective would, I think, somewhat change. But the fact is that they were not. What we really want to see isn't here.
So you interesting. You mentioned before they're going to have to change things. How do you think they could do that?
Right now, I think a lot of events, why they exist, is probably a lot to do with marketing. You know, and getting kind of the word out for games and announcements. But I think really, that side of things is probably, as you said, better served by just going down the kind of social media and internet route. Yeah, they'll get as much, if not more, engagement doing that route. Yeah. So really, what are we left with? I mean, at the end of the day, I think festival type of format where you're going there, you're just going in there, play games, enjoy the kind of gaming culture of things. Maybe even have speakers from the dev community who just want to talk about what it's like to develop a game rather than trying to kind of sell you the game, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, they'll already have different shows for that, don't they?
Yeah, but maybe those shows are the shows that will grow, and maybe like with Gamescom in, you know, that's how they need to evolve. Even with E3, right? I mean, I don't think E3 can continue the way it is. Yeah,
So okay. So if we take Genshin Impact, right? I knew about the 3.0 update well before Gamescom because they do their own updates and stuff. The only reason why I would go to Gamescom for a Genshin Impact thing is for merch. Like it'd have to be exclusive merch. It has to be a reason for me to be there for stuff, and like otherwise, it's a bit pointless. That's the sort of thing I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I always maybe this is my wrong perception. I always thought Gamescom was early demos of games to get you really excited about them. And I used to remember watching on YouTube people actually standing at the stands with the controllers in their hand and the reactions, and they used to get me kind of hyped up. But they don't seem to do that anymore. So
With the internet, I doubt it. I mean, games, trailers, and videos and gameplay walkthroughs there's so much of it.
yeah,
I just think they need a different kind of format and direction with some of this stuff.
I also wonder whether because we're getting older now, right? The newer generation like a less variety of games, and they're more into the kind of the big staples of the Call of Duties and your Fortnites, and maybe they'll go off piste and play another smaller separate game, which probably explains why. Could be another reason why Game Pass and these companies are consolidating under these big brands, because they know it's coming. They're getting less eyes on their games because people are getting sucked into the bigger franchises. But it's very
It's
different
ironic, isn't it?
like with Netflix. Yeah, whereas it's like with Apple Music or Netflix, right? You are more likely to look at other stuff, other music or other shows if you're paying that one-off subscription.
Yeah,
And so therefore, if that trend is happening, what we're seeing in this event is a symptom of that, which is far less meaty
yeah.
things
But
to
I
be.
would also counter that, though, and I would say with these services, whether it be music or games or something or film or something else, right? You do get to kind of look at stuff that you would normally look at, but I don't think you engage in it as long as you would.
No, I agree. But the other kind of strand of what I'm saying is I'm asking the open question here. We've always been recently. It's always been there's more games coming out, more games than you can ever play, and therefore there's lots of news, and that's been supporting all of these events such as Gamescom and E3. Are we now entering a world where there are going to be less games and less news? Because it certainly feels like that this year, COVID or no COVID, right? And hence why we've got this filler on here. I mean, I don't have to answer that question, but I just it's just an interesting theme that I think may be happening. I've got no evidence for that, but
I think that's definitely a conversation for another day. That's actually quite an interesting one. There's a lot of contradictions in there, you know.
yeah, yeah,
It'd be interesting to explore that. But let's move on. Let's move on because obviously we talked at length about Gamescom, and it kind of feels like they need to change the format. Doesn't feel like it's what it was. But there were another two in my eyes noteworthy anyway. There was obviously the Destiny 2 showcase, and they've got the new expansion DLC that arrives, I think, end of February, right, next year.
yeah. So I can give you some of the highlights then, right? So they've announced a new DLC, Lightfall, coming out in February, and they've moved away from a September October release to this new February one. It started because they delayed the Witch Queen, but I think it suited them because it moves them away from the other games coming out towards the Christmas period, because things are more quiet in February. Prior to this event, about 2 or 3 years ago, they already announced 3 expansions that are now 4 expansions because they said they couldn't fit them all in 3. So they had already put the roadmap, right? So this is another one of those DLCs to complete the roadmap. As you've already called out, they're introducing a new planet on Neptune, which is really interesting because up to this point, all of the locations are being very apocalyptic, broken buildings, very dull, bland colours, and some of the dungeons have been more kind of brighter colours, but they've really gone lent into this cyberpunk kind of feel on Neptune.
Looks like a living planet they're on.
Yeah, it's the store background story is there's the last city on Earth where all the humans live. A colony started on Neptune, hidden away, So it's just been revealed, and I don't know the full story, but it's just been recently revealed. Hence why it's actually, for once, like nice coloured buildings and bright. It's like I said, it's like a cyberpunk feel, which is really interesting. It almost looked like a new game. That's what everybody was saying. And a bit of a going off piece slightly a little bit. The rumor is, well, not a rumor, but they've already said after they complete the Light and Dark saga, which is the next expansion after this, which is called Final Shape, Destiny's going to continue. They're going to take it in a different direction, right? And this DLC feels like they're experimenting with where they're going to go next in a different color palette. They've even got a race that's on this planet, something called Cloud Striders, and it's like nothing else you've seen on Destiny, right? They're even releasing, if you pre-order the DLC, they're giving away a gun. Is a merge between an auto rifle, a rocket launcher. Again, it's another example of them just experimenting with a different theme. So that was cool. The other thing that they announced was a new subclass. Everyone thought it was going to be a dark subclass, but they were suspecting it was green. But it's not actually a dark subclass. It's meant to be a play on. It's called Strand, and it's meant to be a play on pulling on strings through different dimensions to bring energy and do all of these kind of superpower moves. But for some reason, everyone thought it was going to be green coloured, which came out to be true. What they've at least marketed so far is there's a significant grapple hook mechanic, which is quite interesting because the level design is probably going to have a far more verticality than any other Destiny game so far.
That's the sense I got from the trailer.
Yeah, it has, and you get some verticality in Destiny where you might do some big drops. You might just drop off, I don't know, like a large ledge, and it goes on for a long time. Almost the fact that you almost get that kind of like as if you're jumping out of an aeroplane kind of feeling, which is quite cool. So again, that's just changing the direction of the gameplay, I think. I think that's probably the key. Oh no, actually, there are a few other things. They finally announced a in-game LFG system.
NFG.
Right?
Lucky for group.
Yeah. There was also you can have loadouts in the game, which sounds crazy because the game's been at what 8 years now.
Yeah.
And you can have loadouts by using a third-party app, but they're building it into the game, right? And then there were a couple of other things like for new players as well, which to be honest, it didn't look that appealing. There was something called accommodation system, where if you have Sherpas for the raid, or even your teammates, you can give them certain cards, which just to say you've been a good vocal person, or you've been covering my back, and it's just to encourage. I think it's probably going to help with the kind of the LFG kind of system where you can say if you're looking for someone who's a Sherpa who's not who doesn't have this long list of requirements for you to get in and are very very patient, that will come out through this system. Or if someone is like more fun to play with or cracking jokes, it's quite an interesting spin. How effective it will be, I don't know, but those are the kind of the gist of the things that they announced. I personally was quite disappointed with the show, to be honest. As I've said before, my expectations are high, right? The game is feeling very stale to me. Now, when they came out with the last DLC, which was the Witch Queen and Beyond Light, but before that, the campaigns were good, the new subclasses were good. But what happens is after the first 3-4 weeks, and it's a live game service, they get you playing the same old strikes, the same maps, and they change nothing in those. We've got one new PvP map in 3 years, right? If you look at the breakdown of what this game has got, they're not talking about any changes to. There's a PvEP game mode, no changes to that. there's no significant change to the number of strikes, and there's nothing about PvP. And they would put that in the marketing now if they're going to do some big changes to that, because it would justify the price. They're increasing the price by £20 as well, so they're increasing there. I was seriously considering just walking away, as I've said to you guys, right?
Well,
Where I've landed is I can't walk away because Sony have bought into them. There's going to be TV shows. There'll be a new
Yeah.
game. I've spent so much time finding a good raid team and a community. I'm going to stick with it, but I'll just play intensely when it comes out in February, and then I'll play here and there, raiding here and there. But I'll use the rest of the time to play the games. And I've tried to walk away and I can't. But I was very disappointed with the show. I think it will be good, a good DLC, but I just expect more.
yeah, but that's probably because they're probably just focusing on what, Destiny 3 or something, and probably with COVID and other things, there's been other distractions which are causing them to delay stuff. So the amount of content is probably quite limited. But they've never really, I think with Destiny, they've never really fixed that game engine problem anyway. So their release cycle of content has always been slow, and it's never really changed.
I agree with you to a point, but they have lied to the community consistently.
Well, but it's been like that since Destiny 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Very true.
And they've promised we're going to add. They've promised we're going to fix PvP. We're relaunching everything. They have clearly worked out that they can release just enough, get the money, keep the audience going that's already there, because they're not going to bring many new players in. Although they said they've had the largest number of new players, 4 million new players last year. But how many of those stick around, I don't know, right? But I think that they've got an asset here they can sweat, and they've spent their money making whatever is Destiny 3, whether they call it that or not. They've already announced they make other games in the pipeline, at least 2 or 3, it could be even more. TV shows, probably movies. All their effort is in that space. They've expanded their studio, another physical location. I mean, God knows, I think they're nearly up to 1,000 people in the studio. It might even be more. They've got people, and it's probably the right business decision. They've worked out the sweet spot of not overcommitting on this game and doing just enough and get the money coming in, which will fund all their new games. which is probably right for them, but it's disappointing as a Destiny player.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not really the most consumer-friendly way of doing it, but it is a business after all, right? So you can understand what they're doing, but like you say, I think some of the promises, and unfortunately, it just feels like it's quite consistent in terms of what I've seen in the past with them, and that's why I didn't really bother with 2.
Gamers have short memories, guys.
Yeah, I'm a classic example of them as well. I was like, I'm definitely walking away if I see some. I see almost like a non-event, and there was a bit of a non-event for me. Then I was like, I'm quitting until, like, I don't know, 3 years time when there's a new game coming out. But here I am. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just stick with it. The show was weird, I thought, as well. The one for Witch Queen, they showed far more gameplay. In this one, it was a lot of this. There's a big tag at the top saying still in development and pre-production and subject to change, and they, it was in pretty much all of the gameplay. They had more talking about how great the game is going to be, and versus actually showing it. Whereas last year they showed more, and the previous year they showed more. So that has me a little bit more nervous, actually, to be honest. But
it's the exact polar opposite to Sony, who basically don't talk at all, just show you a trailer. Here you go, here's your trailer, here's some gameplay, we're not going to talk.
Just to close up the thing, the show was poor for me. The YouTubers have all well received it. I haven't seen many people critique it, but I think they've all lowered their expectations, right? And if any of those community and there's say anything bad, then they're going to lose all of their viewership as well, and their trust. It's become a niche. Although it's a popular game, in terms of an MMO game, it's still very niche in terms of numbers.
Yep.
And and I would imagine those numbers are going to continue to go down until they finish the saga and they can reboot, relaunch, have all the new game engine, new systems, and maybe have a pipeline of more regular content delivery. Yeah, that's it with the show. I just want to. I mean, if you guys have got any more questions on that, throw them in now. But I was going to just cover off the latest season update as well. They have 4 seasons every year. The latest season is pirate themed.
Plunder or something, isn't it? Plunder.
Plunder. That's the one. It's season of the Plunder. Again, filler game modes, filler content. The skins and the gun ornaments are all cool. They've had a good job with that. But the gameplay stuff is all filler. I'm ignoring it. But one interesting thing is that they've re-released the Oryx raid. The name fails me. What's it called?
Fallen King or something?
King's Fall,
yeah.
Which I haven't played yet, but it looks quite good from the videos that I've seen. As in, it's in the latest thing because they have improved the game engine, the lighting and everything. It is much better, and I've heard good reviews from people in terms of the guns, the gameplay, and nostalgia of it. So I'm looking forward to playing that, but that's not going to last me 6 months. There's one more dungeon coming out, which is a 3-player activity. All the dungeons have been good so far. I have to give it to them. Raids and dungeons is Destiny. They're quality. Yeah, whether they will last 6 months or a year, questionable. But they are the real meat, bread and butter for people who are hardcore players in the game. Because there's no other game can touch those type of modes for a first-person shooter. And I can't see anybody investing the money to kind of compete with them. It's just never going to happen. So, but yeah, that's the show.
I like the look of the new trailer. I gotta admit, it just strikes me they're going to do something a little bit different in terms of the environment this time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on from Destiny. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about in this topic was Warframe Tennocon 2022. Now, was this a non-event? I'm not sure it was, because as I was kind of like prepping for this, I kind of realised something about Digital Extremes, who basically obviously do Warframe. They've always had an online presence, and they've been doing Tennocon for about 7 years now, off their own back, really. So I got the sense they kind of like know what to do with this sort of stuff and appease their fans and whatnot. Putting that aside, what was interesting to me and what they kind of they sort of announced it, but they sort of didn't, because it was in one of the keynote talks with the devs. They talked about this parity event. Okay, so what happens with obviously this live service game is that, let's say every 2 weeks a specific vendor makes an appearance in a specific location, and then obviously players flock to this vendor to buy whatever item. So what they explained was that the PC and console variants of the game are running on different schedules, and that's all part of what happens in the on the database backend. So what they're doing is syncing that up between all the actual platforms, so they can implement cross-play and cross-save. Yeah.
That's a huge one. We've been asking. That's been the one thing that I've been looking for.
And I thought that might be interesting for you, Al. They actually said, and I thought to myself, okay, now I can start playing this game again. Right? Thank you. I can start playing this game again. Now, further to that, they also did this Zariman custom PC giveaway. That picture that obviously anybody just listening to the audio won't see, that is a custom PC.
I thought that was some kind of in-game picture.
No, it's a PC they got custom built as a giveaway. It's a one-off build. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I mean, if you're going to give anything away, this is what you should give away. This is the type of thing that, that's a giveaway. I don't know the spec of the PC, however, but with a case like that, you'd imagine it's a pretty good PC in there. And then, what did they really announce game-wise in Tennocon? Warframe always has. They've got no problem with content. They've got almost too much of it, yeah. But they've got this new thing called, how do I pronounce this? The Divari Paradox. This thing is a new open world expansion. Obviously, still free. But I was watching the gameplay video of it, and what it reminds me of is a few things. It reminds me of Okami, a PS2 kind of era game, GameCube era game. It reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima, and it reminds me of Witcher 3. And the reason for that, there's a lot of time spent on horseback or a mount.
Mm.
It's third person, and it takes place, I think, between specific expansions and events. And paradox, meaning there's time travel involved in it. And the actual first mission, the you could call it like a primer mission of it, open world, black and white, had your player basically doing stuff that basically brought the color back to the land. So that for me, right? Oh, that feels like a little bit Ghost of Tsushima with a black and white kind of presentation, and a Kami where you as a player bringing back life to the world, basically getting color back into it. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
at times, basically getting on that steed reminded me of Witcher 3. So it's a very interesting direction they're taking with some of this stuff. Very interesting.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the. I think they've had an open world
Yeah,
section
yeah.
a long time back, right? But I guess it's just they're doing it again with an interesting style
Yeah,
to it.
this feels a bit more narrative driven than the other open worlds. They talked a little bit about this other kind of DLC coming up called Veilbreaker. I'm going to introduce a new Tenno, new character. Was it Styanax? And it's going to have new mechanics, which it took through, I think, one of the campaigns. And they've now got 50 distinct Warframes. 50 distinct characters that you can play with, build up, and do all that sort of thing. Yeah, that for me was not quite a non-event. It was just to form. That's what they've always been doing.
They've all got a reputation of just always having lots of content, haven't
Yeah,
they?
overwhelmingly so, I think.
Too
Yeah,
much, yeah, too
but they
much.
don't have a
Is it
content
is it
problem.
quality? Is it quality though?
No, I think it's this cross-play, cross-save thing is huge. I think the accessibility that it will do from that will make it much more interesting.
Jay, were you talking about the content they release? Is it quality?
Yes.
Is it quality?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yes, it
right.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's been as far as I've seen. Especially I played it. I've never played to really much in depth, but it doesn't seem buggy or anything. So it seems pretty well polished.
I mean, I think something like Destiny and Bungie seems a little bit more polished. But then again, you can say that about Destiny and Bungie versus almost everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. But is that because normally first-person games always feel they're slightly more polished than third-person because the mechanic because you can it's the character moving from that angle that looks more janky if it's not. Are you sure it's not that, or
No,
do you
no.
mean the kind of polish
Just the
of like the
polish and the
weapons?
art
Yeah.
direction
Okay.
and those sorts of kind of
Yeah.
like
Okay.
things that,
Yeah.
production
Yeah.
values. And don't
Yeah.
get me
Okay.
wrong, I mean, Digital Extremes have very good production values and it's getting better and better, much as I can see. But Bungie and Destiny, I mean, you know, that's AAA. Whereas Warframe, it's approaching that. Just it just doesn't feel as well realized in many ways.
Yeah.
But it's still really good. Remember, it's an absolute free to play game as well. Yeah, how they do
Yeah.
it, I have no idea. But it's
There's enough people that buy stuff from it. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
this is the thing with good. I think free-to-play models that actually think about the to make the game actually fun, and actually getting the players to purchase based on what they're enjoying out of the game, not to pay to win and all this other
yeah,
stuff, right? So I think they actually do it really well, so that actually people buy the other stuff around it, some skins, the odd credit for Warframes, the odd bit of this for that, but there's still people that play it will buy stuff in and around it, not necessarily to pay
yeah,
to win reasons. So it's a pretty good
yeah,
model.
definitely. And the other thing that I haven't really talked about is they've got a new game, Soulframe, which is more of D&D, if you can call it that. RPG, third person. Obviously not sci-fi, okay, but still has a real interesting, distinct art style. You know, your typical, digital extremes, art style. So they announced that and had some kind of gameplay video and cinematics for that.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for that. It looked like same sort of character style
Mm.
models and movement as
Yeah,
the
yeah,
main
definitely,
Warframe. So they
definitely.
probably,
I mean, you imagine the art team's the same, wouldn't you? So
Yeah, I imagine they just reuse the engine, right? Reuse some of the assets that you've already got, and expand it, right? So as long as it works out well, then I think yeah, it's a good thing to branch off to another game. So
that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of Warframe and Tennocon and Digital Extremes. But yeah, I mean, they're going well. I mean, as an event, yeah, it was an event, it wasn't a non-event, but largely because I found out that cross-play and cross-save is finally coming, and what they're doing, looks as impressive as usual. And guys, I think with that said, let's move on to the next topic.